All right, so we're back with another episode of the 1-4 Problems podcast. Today, I'm super excited because we have my friend Ben Zacks, founder of Fine Fettle, on the episode. We got a lit episode today. We're going to be talking about mission-focused culture in the ever-evolving cannabis industry. Ben, super excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so I love to start off every episode with first talking about the drink and why that's important. You chose not to bring on any of your product to the episode today. I won't hold that against you, but tell me why you chose coffee. Why is that something that was meaningful?
So first I'll say I did not choose a cannabis product because if I started with that, there would be no podcast. It would just be me falling asleep right here on this pretty comfortable chair. But coffee. So out of college and in college, I was never a coffee drinker. I was a teacher after college, and I did not drink coffee. And then I started to sit at a desk, and I am an extroverted thinker, and I need movement and action. I pace around during meetings, but coffee, when I was sitting at the desk, was like this requirement. And then I worked at Bridgewater, the hedge fund in Southern Connecticut, and I had a team there who was a bunch of engineers. We were building out the cloud infrastructure for them, and it was a group of people there with a really unique business culture who it attracts folks who are super interested in things, right? They're hobbyists and a lot of developers who have deep passions. And our team got into coffee, and it was a way that I, who was not a developer and on the operations side, had no idea really the work they were doing, could create bond and create relationship. And so we bought flavor machines, and we bought AeroPress and high-end espresso machines, and we got really into coffee. And so now I've turned into a coffee drinker and somewhat of a coffee snob. And so it was the perfect drink to cover on this.
That's awesome. And so we got Purgatory here, local coffee shop on Main Street, Middletown ourselves. So cheers to coffee and becoming coffee snobs together.
Cheers. Bye, dear.
So we have a pretty interesting conversation queued up for today, but I think one of the first things I want to talk about is, your background and journey of Fine Fettle in general, because when we first met, very different organization than it is today. And obviously you are a huge part of why that happened. And so, I'm really interested in what made you want to start in this industry? And then what made you, tell me back then about how this was going to play out? And it certainly has done that. So I'm excited to hear about it.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey of almost 6 years now. When we started, all we had with you guys even was just this first license in Willimantic. As I noted before, I was a teacher. I then worked in education technology for a couple of ed tech startups. I then went and worked at Bridgewater, and I was coming in to work in our family business, and we built cell towers. And during that period, we had started looking at this industry more on the investment side and really looked at it from a lens of healthcare and honestly, addiction services recovery. And Connecticut, I grew up in West Hartford. I'm from here. We're from here, was having an application. And they had a small medical program. There were 9 stores and 4 growers. And because we had invested out of state, it was time to apply. So we partnered with 2 leading pharmacists in the area and also huge UConn fans who we sat next to at games. And the applications are a bit of like an operational, but also structural beauty contest. We put in applications all over Connecticut, and then we won in Willimantic. And as we were looking at the industry and as we were looking at sort of what was happening in the various states, our view was, right, it might be cool or fun to have one store, but to really build a business, you've got to create scale. And from there, we acquired the license towards our second store in Newington, and it's been just a snowball effect from there. And so today we've got 8 stores open in Connecticut. We're opening a 9th soon. We just built out our cultivation facility in Connecticut. We're in Massachusetts, where we have an outdoor cultivation and 2 dispensaries. And we also won a license in Georgia, where we built an enormous grow facility. opened up 3 dispensaries so far. And as the program grows there, can keep building. And so we've had to both build this business from each individual location because it's a hyper-local business. It's literally illegal to cross state lines. So there's no operational synergy. And then also building out a corporate team and a corporate development and growing and scaling and expanding. So, 5.5 years ago, 6 years ago today, it was just me working with the GC to help build our dispensary in Willimantic. And now we're at 275 people. We're at, I think it's 13 stores open, 3 grows, under construction in 4 more locations right now. And it's just really blown up. And, trying to keep that feeling of being this small local business while also understanding what we need to grow and scale to build and be successful and be profitable, take risks, not take stupid risks, for the opportunity for us to really thrive.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. Like, to be able to grow the company to that size, that many locations in the course of 6 years, like it is truly impressive. And it's been really awesome to see from afar, right? How the journey and where you've gone. So I think what's interesting about that is this industry is so incredibly unique. And at, earlier on in starting this out, this industry was not nearly as I would say, okay to partake in, right?
Sure. Yeah, in all directions.
Yeah. And so I think, you seeing that 6 years ago and saying I know, I see where this is going and where I want to take it. How has that vision continued to scale now?
Yeah. So I think our overall and original thesis was that society liberalizes. And I don't mean that in a left, right, Democrat, Republican, but society opens up, right, in general. And there become evolving maybe political views about issues, but you see more openness and opportunity in general. And so getting in early into the medical markets, whether it was Connecticut and now Georgia, our view is that things will open up and there will be opportunity for expansion. And that was sort of always core in our thesis of wanting to grow and expand. And then also knowing that as you grow and expand, there are just business synergies, not to use every buzzword in the book, but it's true, right? You get an opportunity to scale and have more problems, but also deal with those problems because you got more team and more people to deal with it. And so we always had this view of we need to be able to be in a market. We needed to be able to have scale in that market. We need to be able to win that market. And we need to be able to do as much as we possibly could from a vertical integration standpoint, which in cannabis really means going from your seed to your sale, right? Because if you own your supply chain, you can own your margin at the end of the day. And getting that opportunity for us is huge in every market. And then also understanding that each market is its own unique beast as a state. We have different regulators, different rules, different setup, different structures, different risks, different licensing, but also being able to use our understandings and learnings and kind of mistakes from the past to do the next phase and the next place better. And I think that it gives us an opportunity to just do each next place better than we did the last one, which then allows us to have a better opportunity to succeed and then learn from the mistakes. We do a really good job at the company of saying, all right, what just happened? What went well? What could have gone better? And what just didn't go well that we need to think about? And then we're constantly looking back so that we don't make the same mistakes over and over, and then refining, updating our processes to ensure that success as we move ahead. So I think that's really how we think about our growth in general.
Yeah. And I think you'll see from a lot of these conversations I've been having with other business leaders, the ones that are growing rapidly, they're not afraid of that change. They openly embrace the ability to say, what didn't go right and how can I fix it? And it takes a certain type of organization and certain type of team and a culture to be able to bring out people who are okay with that, people that like that kind of change. And so I think one of the interesting parts of the conversation that you've said so far was you started, it was just you. You have 275 people now. How did you create like a leadership team that, gathered around the mission and where you wanted to take the business?
Yeah. And it starts first with that mission, right? So for us, the mission that we sort of talk about is this idea of comfort in cannabis. And the reason why we like that is because that means a lot. Because the coolest thing about the industry for me is not like, oh, I'm in this avant-garde place. Oh, I'm a legal drug dealer. Oh, we're selling weed. Like there's all those sort of fun parts about it, which I think creates an intrigue and excitement about what we do. But we are constantly changing stigma. We're changing operations. We're changing the way we do things. And this idea of comfort is for anyone who is our customer and partner, vendor, whatever it might be. So I love it because as somebody who's probably got undiagnosed ADD, I am always looking at different parts of the business, right? We do science, information technology, we do customer service, we do retail, we do horticulture, we do lobbying, we do sociology, we do community service, we do social equity. This goes. Our industry is so all encompassing. I think different than a lot of others, right? We have so many things that we need to worry about that I think are just base status quo for others. Like what I now know about electrical engineering and taxes, I never would have thought I had to know about, right? And so that part is really exciting, but also it's like this core to the mission. And so when we onboard everybody, it's about like, do you understand what we're trying to accomplish and how do you fit into that? And so that helps create buy-in, right? And so the most important thing we can do is try and search for people who we think will buy into the mission that we're going towards. And you're absolutely right. Like the biggest growth and development for me and for the company has been how I have built a team around me. Because as noted, like at the beginning, I had a bookkeeper outsourced, and that was it, other than the people who literally worked in the store. So it's sometimes hard because there are so many things we do at Fine Fettle, and I've done every single one of them. And what's great about that is I can engage with employees all over the place, and I can actually empathize with what they're trying to do and the problems they're having because I probably have the same ones. But also I can take a step back and be like, all right, how can I potentially guide? The problem with that is sometimes as a founder, you want to do everything. It's like, oh, I can just do this. I can just take this on. And so building a team that I can trust, building a team that I can hand things off to, but also giving them the space to own their work and own their stuff and develop their parts of the organization the way they want to within a structure is the most important thing for me to think about as we scale. So it's like, how do we do things the right way while also giving space for people to do it their way? And finding that balance has been an incredibly important part of my journey as a leader, and also creating a company that I think people want to work for and feel empowered to work for.
I think that's one of the most underestimated things when you're in a leadership role is your ability to actually get in the weeds and understand what everyone's going through. And you, similar to me, when I joined Charles IT, it was the same thing. I was running 6 different departments, and I knew how to do a purchase order, to book the transaction, to sell an agreement to somebody, right? I knew all these different things, but as far as continuing to step out of it, I think one of the most difficult things for a leader is to be able to trust and understand that everyone's not going to do it exactly the way that you would do it, but how can I create a process or some structure in place to say, this is the general framework, right? This is what I'm looking for, right? And then allow them to be able to work creatively within that. How's that something that you've done with Fine?
Yeah. So I think for us, it really stems from understanding where people's strengths and weaknesses lie up front.
Yeah.
And we're incredibly open and transparent about saying, Ben is good and bad at this. Sal is good and bad at this. He, she, whatever is good and bad at that. And then making sure that we guardrail against those weaknesses, but specifically push people's strengths, because what happens is people either are nervous and shy away from where they're weak and then things just get lost, or they spend so much time at the things that they struggle with and then you're not able to use them for where they really can shine. And so what we've tried to do is I have a chief of staff, and I think my team would describe me as like creative and sort of like, I don't want to say visionary, but I have like a picture of what I want things to be and strategic towards that. I cannot implement that at scale. Like it's just not where I am good.
Yeah.
So I have a chief of staff who is the single most process goal-oriented person that I've probably ever worked with. And he's got his own issues, and I love him, and we love him for his strengths and his weaknesses. And so when I say like, hey, we need to have way more of a goal-driven culture, and this is how I want to think about goals and outcomes and measuring, he'll say, okay, I got it. I'm going to create the framework for that to work with him.
Yeah.
I then can look at the framework and say, yep, this is in the direction. And then I say, all right, we adjust it. And then I say, okay, now go implement it. And I'm going to be your cheerleader to implement this process that honestly, you're going to do better than me. But I know that it's towards this end goal. So we've installed like a full objectives and key results, OKRs program across the company. And each department sort of gets to do it differently, but everyone knows that they have to have ambitious goals that are not numeric. They're not like, we need to accomplish this thing, but then they have key results within it that are measures and targets of, did we reach the goal? Like, so the goal can just be something in retail, simple as we need to have amazing customer service, and everyone's got to be singularly focused on reaching that goal of having amazing customer service. And then we have run the business measurements. What is our customer NPS score? What is our retention rates? Et cetera, et cetera. And then we have change the business goals. So like, what are things that we're going to accomplish in the store so that the metrics can get better? And so everyone in every department thinks about things like run the business and change the business. And they get to choose, how do I define success in running the business? And what are the things I want to do to change the business? And then they get to manage towards those in their own way, as long as they understand that they're reaching towards goals. And so those balances have been like really, really important for us to keep consistency so that we all know where things are going and we have management structures, while also making sure our experts can be experts in succeeding in the areas where we've hired them to succeed.
Yeah.
And that, I think, helps be a differentiator for us, because everyone at Fine Fettle in their value system has to be someone who's goal-oriented. Because if they're not someone who's goal-oriented and they're more task-oriented, then they're not going to see the bigger picture, and then they're sort of going to get lost in the shuffle of how we do things. And so, understanding that from hiring to their work product to what they want to do in their own personal and professional life, like everyone has to have that right mindset, and it's got to start to their overall progress as an employee at Fine Fettle.
Yeah, I love that, because I think one of the things that a lot of organizations struggle with is like really truly understanding like what kind of people they want in the organization. Like they talk about it, right? And we're like, well, this is generally what we look for. But like saying I want someone that is goal oriented, because of the fact that if they're not, they might miss the messaging of it, and actively like put that into your business. But then also, it's really important for you to know who you are, right? You were like, I'll come up with strategy and a vision. There's a picture here, but please don't let me be the person to run the process, right? And it's hard to say that openly, but then once you do it, like it fundamentally changes things. And I feel like that has to be something that ties into why your organization has been able to grow the way it has.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And it's like, when I'm managing, I try to manage in that same way of like, hey, what are you trying to accomplish? How are you going to get there? And how are you going to define whether you're successful or not?
Yeah.
And then so like we talked about the mission of creating comfort in cannabis, and then we have our core values. And I think the most important core value at Fine Fettle is this idea of be bold and create change. And when you sort of look into the sub words of that, it's really about like this idea that if something is broken, go fix it. And if you're complaining about the same thing over and over, you are part of the problem.
I love it.
And we want people who are constantly trying to make things better. And honestly, more importantly than that, we need managers and people who are open to hearing that things are not perfect and need to be done better, right? So we have, call it lower level employees who do oftentimes monotonous work. You know who's really knowledgeable about that monotonous work? The people doing it. So if that person is like, hey, I have an idea here that would make this better or more efficient, their manager better listen.
Yeah.
So we have this thing in all of our locations that's a QR code that people can scan and submit to a suggestion box. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we track as one of our goals is to be a company that lives by our core values, passionately live our values is how we define it. Yep. Is like, we actually have a metric that says how many suggestion box submissions did each facility get? And it's not just like that, but it's like, or did they go right to their manager and talk about it? Because one of the things that we want to do is like have this culture where people are actually not incentivized financially, but incentivized to think about making stuff better. And how do you measure that? And so constantly like reinforcing your culture and constantly thinking about ways to embed it into the way you do things every day is core to the way we work. And when everyone has this mentality of like living within the culture, that we think will allow us to continually try and get better and better and better every day and have this growth mindset, even within people in roles that you think of as doing the same thing over and over and over. And so that has to flow throughout the business. The other thing that we do is every one of our goals across the company flows up to. And so it's not supposed to be hierarchical in the sense of, oh, I'm here and they're there. It's like, nope, everyone's work, everyone's outcomes actually leads towards this thing we're trying to accomplish. And so we start a quarterly meeting of our objectives and key results, and we show the alignment view of every key result and objective. And it flows. And it not only flows, like we have this goal of achieving operational excellence. That's like a very big, lofty thing. And guess what? Like every store has to have that in inventory. Every grow has to have that in the trim room. The finance team has to have that with accounts payable. I have to have that with the way that our meetings run and board meetings go and operate, right? And so everyone then can see like, oh, I'm really part of a bigger picture to help us succeed and do well and bring our ultimate goal of comfort in cannabis, because then it all flows up to there and it actually makes sense and nothing lives out stranded on an island.
Yeah. Wow. So that's really powerful. I think it's having the alignment has got to be, again, it's one of the things that will differentiate your business and allow you to continue to grow. So that is really cool that you're doing it throughout the entire organization.
Yeah. And we sometimes have people who are great and aren't a culture fit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're like, I do it this way. That doesn't fly with us. And, and so just getting it to a place where we can build a team who believes in what we're doing, and any new employee comes in and sees the person next to them, above them, behind them, to the side of them, working in that way. We hope that it like brings a sense of joy. Because at the end of the day, right, like this is a place to work. It's a job. It's not your life. It's not your family. But if we can be an enjoyable place to work and a place that people feel like we're doing the right thing, we screw up constantly, you know, we're less likely to see consistent bad outcomes. And we're also more likely to see change create progress.
Yeah, absolutely. So being in the cannabis industry, it's not the quote unquote traditional business route, right? And so like, what are some of the things that, you know, you've seen now in your time in the space that have just made it feel like it's different than what you would say a traditional business?
So I think that just from the business standpoint, this idea of seed to sale, which is so important for our profitability at the end of the day, is not something that any other business basically does. Like I've done a lot of research, and the only company that I can really tell is seed to sale to the extent in their analogous business is Ashley's Furniture, who literally owns the trees in Indonesia. They own the real estate where their stores lie. They own their trucks. They make their furniture. They ship it. They ship it sometimes on their own pallets and boats and do it. We do that. Like we start our genetics.
Yeah.
We then grow them. We then extract them and roll them and wrap them. And we have vendors and things. We then ship it to our stores and then sell it. We own the entire supply chain in lots of ways. And we also have vendors and we wholesale. But that idea of seed to sale is sort of wild because it would be like you guys then making your computers also and your software.
Yeah.
Right? It's really crazy. The other part that's nuts in it is, as I noted, like we're so at the whim of regulatory and legislative. We have goals in social equity and community service and philanthropy that are actually built into the requirements of our industry that I think other people don't even close to have. Like, think about if the internet was first built saying, hey, you guys can only be in this if you have like a social impact on the way you build your software and how you have to give back. And that's a requirement to actually be able to do X, Y, and Z, like where will our world be? But I think that because of our industry and because of how many people have been arrested and what types of communities and the stigma being put on it, we actually sort of welcome the most difficult aspects that are around the stigma because we are so confident and trustworthy that we're going to do it in the right way that ultimately we can change people's perception, which then goes back to our mission of creating comfort in cannabis, because we have a lot of 1980s war on drugs, Nancy Reagan legislators and politicians who are just like, no way. But then when we can come back and be like, all right, well, we create 275 jobs and we've done 10,000 hours of community service and we've created millions and millions of tax dollars and we've had nobody arrested and you can't track any youth usage that comes from a child protected package. Oh, and we gave all of this philanthropy and we didn't create a nuisance to our neighbors. Like, what other business is doing it like that?
Yeah.
And so we have to create comfort there. We also have customers who, then on the customer side, we have a grandmother whose grandchild said, you're in so much pain, stop worrying about this, come in. And they're petrified, nervous, embarrassed to walk in the store. And then we have people who, for whatever reason, have been consuming cannabis in their life for a long time, sometimes have felt personally shunned, sometimes have felt like an outsider. And then now they can come into this community and feel more comfortable in themselves because something that they're passionate about and has helped them in their life is now brought out of a stigmatized state. And having to think about that all throughout the business is, I think, really unique. And it's what drives me and us every day. And honestly, after 6 years, what keeps me totally engaged and intrigued all the time as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious because my gut tells me, being someone that has lived in Connecticut my entire life, that Connecticut is probably making it a little bit more difficult than other states to be able to, grow in the state. And you mentioned the numbers up Massachusetts, and I'm wondering if people are just like driving it up in going into Massachusetts. And so I don't know if that's something that is a fact or fiction, but curious to see your take on that.
Yeah. So there's generally like 4 stages of the evolution of a state in the cannabis, as I think about it, at least. The first is brand new medical, and we're in that in Georgia.
Yeah.
The second is a well infrastructured set up medical program. The third is the beginnings of adult use. And the fourth is a saturated adult use market. And we've been in every one of those positions, and we're in 3 of them right now. In Georgia, we are brand new. The whole industry is brand new. There's 11 million people. There's only 25,000 patients with a card. Maybe half of them are at. Then we're in Connecticut, which we're still new in adult use, but it's getting towards like sort of stasis, I guess, in the state. And then there's Massachusetts, where there's, if you drive up there, there's just a billboard. Every other billboard is cannabis. There's 300 stores, 120 grows. There's stores closing because it's way too saturated.
Wow.
And each state is totally different. So Georgia, by far the most conservative, by far the most restrictive medical program, probably the easiest to do business in, right? The regulators there, especially since it's so new, really want to make it more of a partnership than a regulatory body and try and guide and support and help us to get there. In Connecticut, a very conservative adult use program, the strictest adult use program in the country, actually a very measured and thoughtful growth structure and licensing structure, an amazingly smart regulatory group, but an incredibly strict regulatory group. And then Massachusetts, which is oversaturated, too many licenses, wide open in terms of licensing, a very well structured cannabis control commission, but also very inconsistent.
Mm.
And so it's been like completely different in each place and having to deal with that. So like, again, in Georgia, like we are so new. It's so early. We're losing money there, but there's real opportunity for growth because if things open up there, just like we're structured so uniquely to win that market. And our business model is to win the markets we're in. In Connecticut, we have pretty significant market share.
Yep.
We've done a really great job of getting all of our local approvals, getting our stores open, building out. Like our grow is the first big indoor licensed grow to get done in the state. We have the most stores open basically right now, and we've gotten them open quickly. But at the same time, Connecticut's infrastructure of the market is really restrictive. Prices are really high. There are certain embedded costs that we just can't fight to keep prices down. Massachusetts was like the green rush of the whole industry, and everyone was crushing it. And there was so much demand, but licenses were completely unlimited. And I would guess 80% of the investment dollars in that state are poof, gone.
Yeah. Wild.
And it's sort of scary. And I think we've already seen in the past 7 or 8 months, 15 medical stores close, probably 30 or 40 adult use stores, and then grows. You don't actually know the numbers because maybe they keep one grow room open, but one time they had 15. And so it's just scaled down and scaled back. Now, prices are incredibly low, but that won't sustain. And if you read online and read the reviews, people actually think quality's come down. Well, why has quality come down? Because to survive, companies have needed to cut costs in a different way. But you don't have the money to invest in automation. So it's not like you're cutting a cost to make something better. You're cutting a cost because you have to. And then there's ramifications of that. And so it's another fun part, though, of the industry because every state has to be handled differently. So while there are these big multi-state operators who in theory have all of this infrastructure to succeed, it's like, oh no, I have to like go in and I have to market in insert random town here in Connecticut, and my headquarters are there, and I don't have that local focus. So what I like to do in thinking about our business is, while we're not a multi-state operator, we are a single state operator with corporate support. So in Georgia, we have a dedicated market president and a dedicated marketing team.
Yeah.
In Connecticut, we hyper-localize our marketing for Connecticut. We hyper-localize our marketing for Massachusetts. And then we give HR and finance support across the board.
Yep.
We have a national cultivation director, but because of humidity and because of the building, our SOPs in our Connecticut building and Georgia Grow building that have the same racking, the same lighting, the same HVAC equipment, the same fans have to actually be done differently because of all the things that happen. And then there's the making of various products and different rules around it. So I think one thing that's been unique to us and part of our special sauce is that just focused commitment to each store and each market. We market Waterbury differently than Stamford and Stamford differently than Norwalk, even though they're 22 minutes apart, because we know about sort of the hyper-localized focus of business. And then we think about each market and how we have to do it differently. So every state gets a plan, every store gets a plan, but that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of planning and it's a lot of thoughtful focus that once you get too big, it's almost impossible to do. And so, right, we don't want to just be everywhere.
Yeah.
We want to own where we are. And our full team is really believing in that strategy.
Yeah.
And I think that all goes back to like, why do people want to come to work every day? Why are they going to care? Why are they going to focus? Why are they going to struggle?
Yeah.
Because they know we're all connected to it together.
Yep. No, for sure. And I think one of the interesting parts of that is if everything is so different, right? Like it's the same, but it's different. You know, how in your role where, again, we circle all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, you're like, as a founder, we're doing it all. How do you continue to take that and now effectively be able to like delegate those things away, but without it being so incredibly standardized?
Yeah. So I think for us, it goes back to this idea of having management structures so that people can both manage up and manage down in a way that there's transparency and guidance across it. And then giving our experts, who are really our functional and department leads and senior leadership team, the opportunity to build exactly what they want to within a corporate structure. And that balance is really, really difficult. And it's something that I'm constantly struggling with because, as we talked a little bit before about like our OKRs, we have that because I want everyone to be incredibly goal-oriented. And I want everyone to think about their goals in terms of a subjective reality and an objective set of measures. And if we do that, we can at least know that people are rowing in the direction that we want,
Yep.
but also hiring good people who then know what to do within their departments. And one of the battles that I have constantly with my senior leadership team, honestly, and one of the things that I really push is this idea of contentful management versus structural management. And I am a believer that 90% of probably what you do in terms of management is just having a management structure and being like, what is the way this is supposed to run? And if you have good infrastructure in the way your program and systems are set up, I think that the last 10% is subject matter expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're a little unique in that thinking, whereas a lot of places want subject matter experts all over the place.
Yep.
And I actually think that those subject matter experts are, at the end of the day, really important. But if you don't have a corporate infrastructure to allow them to do their work and know what's going on and honestly not worry about the management structures, they're probably not going to be able to succeed. And they definitely won't be able to succeed at scale. They're going to be able to own their one thing, but how does that fit into the larger whole?
Yeah.
And it's it's some of the biggest frustration and difficulty that we end up having, because when people aren't working out, I find that it's generally not because they don't know what to do or how to do in their job. It's because they don't know the way they're supposed to go about it and run it.
Yeah.
Running a department and knowing how to do the things in your department are very, very different. And so, like for me, this, I'll talk about my chief of staff again in a certain sense. Like, we've had a lot of turnover in marketing. We found marketing very hard, partially because of what I discussed before, like it's so hyper-localized.
Yep.
And what ended up happening, I felt, was like we couldn't get the work done for each store and for each area and for each, right? Because we have locations, we have digital, we have physical, we have in-store, we have design. I mean, there's so much to marketing. And I think that the part of it that gets really interesting is that we had all these good ideas, but we couldn't get them done. So I made a change in marketing and I put in my chief of staff to manage marketing. Now, did he come up with like new great creative ideas? Absolutely not. Because that's not actually his skill set.
Process.
But he was like, this is how we are going to accomplish all the things we need to get done in marketing.
Yeah.
So the team was like, all right, I know how this works. And then we brought in a new EVP of marketing who knows all of the various areas, has a really good idea for them, is creative in doing things different ways, has good thoughts and understanding, and she's amazing in that sort of way, but she got to fit into a way that things worked. So when she had all these really cool ideas that got our whole marketing department super excited about what we could accomplish and what we could do and where we were going, but we also knew we'd get it done.
Yeah.
And so I think that like that's how it sort of worked for us. And that is how I want my managers to ensure that things move forward and progress, and that we know we can get things done. We know how we measure them. We know why we're getting them done, which are just goals. And then let them say, this is the best way to accomplish that, because that's where their subject matter expertise comes into play. And then they also can develop people within that and let people succeed and grow and become better at their jobs. It's hard to like define specific areas of it, but I think that's how we stay rowing in the same direction.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, it's really important if you are trying to create this culture of growth and change and progression, right? You need to have that. And I think it's interesting to hear how it's being done and implemented on the ground. But I'm curious to hear from the visionary seat, where do you see this industry going, in the next 5 years? I know it's a pretty blanketed statement, but it's been 6.
Yeah.
Different.
It's so the industry at large, I think, will continue to open up, right? And I think that we'll see more people feeling comfortable with the realities of the industry in their various states, right? So I think over time, like in Connecticut, advertising rules will sort of get less restrictive. And I think the product categories and rules will get less restrictive.
Yeah.
I think Georgia will believe that the plants can help patients and give an open opportunity for the patients to have more products and, help from this plant. I also worry that it's just a commodity business at the end of the day, and we're going to be another liquor store, right? And so, but I also don't know, because like, look, Trump, he could do anything and I wouldn't be super surprised, right? Like he could say, I've got these really conservative people to my side who are prohibitionists, and I'm like shutting this off. And I'm going to make sure that the federal government comes in to the states, right? Like he talks about small government, but then he does a lot of things where big government makes a lot of choices. I could also see him being like, this is crazy. We may waste so many taxpayer dollars putting people in jail, over-regulating this, fighting between state and government, and just being like, I am decriminalizing, period, with a stroke of a pen. But honestly, for me, like that complete question and unknowing of where the industry could go is what's so exciting. Because it's like anything could change. And I think that we're uniquely structured as a company to always be nimble, right? Like our approval process takes a matter of hours, not a matter of weeks and months. We know what we want to analyze and we analyze it and we make decisions. We also know oftentimes what we think we want to analyze, we do it and then we throw it away. And like we're constantly understanding that there is change and that's a part of our industry and our business that we can't get away from. And so rather than being frustrated and annoyed by like how much can happen with one vote or two votes or a change in policy and procedure or a new state, that we're like constantly waiting for something to happen and then we focus on it right away. And I think that our like corporate structure and our management philosophy and our core values lend us to being able to be incredibly, incredibly nimble. Like in Connecticut, we're probably the biggest cannabis company. But I think if you ask people in our industry, like, who do you think is the entrepreneurial, avant-garde, fast-moving company? I think basically everyone would say Fine Fettle. And we've got eight stores and a grow. That's a lot. We got 160 people in this state. And we move quicker than someone with one store, right? If we see something happening in the market and we think we should test it in terms of pricing, our menu moves and changes quicker than anyone else. If we think there needs to be a deal, if we think we need to move something, we do it. If we see a chink in the armor of the law that we can exploit to market better, we're the first ones to do it. And that's just because we've just created a culture of constantly looking towards the next thing. And that's what I think is really our differentiator. I know when we see a problem and we set a goal to fix it, our team is all hands on deck to do it and everyone is bought in to make the change. And that's, I think, what makes us pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to transition us here to the end of this show. And I want to again thank you for your time and all your insight. I think it was a really awesome conversation. Well, for the last part of our show, we've been having everyone come on, take their visionary skills and put them to keyboard. And so we actually have everybody do a typing test and they'll rank you on the leaderboard. So we have a leaderboard that has quite a bunch of people on it and scores that range from like could be chief of staff level to you could tell they're visionaries and they don't actually put anything
in writing. Interesting. I am a fast two-finger typer. That's how I would define my style. So I'm quick, but I do not do it properly.
He's not lying. He can
fly.
He can move.
Should I show my test results?
Yeah, there could be an ad pop up because
Not Grammarly.
that's how it goes.
I had two typos in there.
Didn't it do Grammarly?
Yeah, I have a Grammarly.
That's amazing.
I use that.
That is amazing marketing.
So I got 67 words per minute and 91%.
Beat that. Please tell me beat
No.
that. What was the number? No.
67 words per minute.
So close. You get 70.
Final.
Oh, 61. Because I had 91%. I had 3 typos.